Funding analysis using the lifestyle balance sheet. This is where we randomize a bunch of data, make a fictitious couple, and we do a balance sheet analysis on their household. So let's take a look at this particular one. Here we've got Ashley and Lewis of Montana. They're in their mid-60s, so they're right at the point that they're retiring. Here's what little we know about them. They expect to live to 93 and 96 based on some type of longevity analysis. So he's expected to live longer than her, which is a little bit interesting. They have medical concerns. They have modest living expenses. So I don't know where they are in Montana. They have grown kids and some dogs. Okay, so here are the numbers that we came up with, the randomizer. In terms of current financial assets, they have about $45,000. That's all their investment accounts and stuff. In real assets, they have a total present value of about $85,000. That could be home equity, that could be rental, that could be part of a business, but that's what they have listed. Important thing is they have zero future savings, which means that they are definitely in the decumulation mode, as they say, or they're at retirement. They're not saving anymore from here on out. They're both retired. They've listed some pension income of a value of about $80,000, and they have a big nugget in the guaranteed income, their Social Security. We'll take a little bit closer look at that and try to back out where they got that figure. That gives them an asset base of around $670,000, and that's the mix in percentage terms. Let's look at the liability side. So for their lifestyle expenses, they got a big bucket list. They've got a lot of activities or causes and stuff that they want to spend on. They have some legacies that they want to provide to, and then the rest of the essential costs, tax, medical, and essential living. They've got a good modest budget, but that works for them. That works great. That brings the total there to $870,000, about $200 more than their current asset base. And there's the composition of that from a percentage case. So given that breakdown, if we look at the asset side, we can see that by far their social capital, which is the pension income side, is the biggest bucket, and on the liability side it's the lifestyle expenses or the discretionary expenses. That means they are a free to choose, or at least free to choose funding profile is what they started out with. They're right on the cusp here of going to another one, and the question is whether or not they can maintain this funding profile. We're going to talk about that. So let's calculate their funded ratio given this asset base here. So it's 0.77, so they're what we say they're underfunded. They're under 0.8, which is not good given that you're going into retirement, but it's also not the end of the world. So let's talk about what we need to look at here in the data that's been provided. Discrepancy, when you just look at it from a balance sheet standpoint, is the lifestyle expenses. That's almost half their liability costs. Remember, these are things that are they're not mandatory expenses. So, that's kind of the obvious low-hanging fruit, and we need to look at why they're so big and how we can slash them right away. And I mean, just at a quick kind of cursory SWOT analysis, strength, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. I mean, if you reduce the lifestyle expenses by $200,000, that's going to get you, I made these numbers line up so it'd be easier, than it'd be assets $670,000, liability $670,000 for a funded ratio of 1. Now you're still constrained, but you're getting closer. And if you reduce it further, you're going to get to a funded ratio of 1.8. If you reduce it another total of 300,000, so you get that 420 bucket here down to 120. So if you do that, if you reduce that to get your funded ratio up, which is the prudent thing to do, it's also going to change your funding type. It's going to turn this household into a sleep like a baby, which is not necessarily a bad thing. It just means that we're covering. You've got all these nice safer income assets, and they're going to be focused primarily on your essential cost buckets down here. You can always there's a video for each of the funding types over here on the website, and you can view that to get more information. Something else that just jumps out real high is the low liquidity they have. So usually any cash reserves come from most of them come from the current financial assets, and that's usually, in your investments accounts where you're holding cash positions. Current financial assets can also be bank accounts and stuff like that, but this is pretty low. So we don't know how we got this low. Maybe something happened where they had to spend a bunch out of it, for a medical emergency or something, but it's low, and that's a real problem going into retirement or later in life. You generally want to be a little bit higher than cash liquid than you normally are. Now, in the real assets, we don't know how liquid those are. If they're a rental property or house, they're not, and you need to sell them. That's not over liquid, but they may have a home equity line of credit on the house. They may have, be able to do a loan on a, life insurance policy. Actually, that would fall under the pension income, but that's a big issue. We just don't know how liquid these assets are, but we do know they're pretty light. So because of liquidity, underfundedness, and all this, we talk about dependent risk. And again, that is the idea of where one bad thing can lead to another and pretty quickly cascade out of control. So there's more on all the different risk types here, and you can most of these icons are hot links, so you can go straight to them and watch the video to learn more about dependent risk. Another area of interest in this particular one is the Social Security, given their ages. They're right here at full retirement age for both of them. So the question is, how did they come up with the 460K number? So I just was back. I wanted to get an idea about how much that was in a monthly amount, because this, again, is covering both of them. If both of them, it's covering the entire household, so maybe one or both are receiving Social Security. So if I use the payment spreadsheet function and a real return of 1%, assuming about a 2% or so inflation rate for about 30 years on this 460, it's a rate somewhere around this, and then it would get bumped up at the inflation rate every year. So, and I'm trying to, I don't have any more information right now in terms of how they're doing it, but there may be some opportunities here. Might be a little bit harder to delay or to get a higher amount, but it'd be interesting to find out exactly what they're on and if Social Security has indeed started up. The good news is that they've made it to pretty much full retirement age, which is always good. So some other things that are always interested to look for that don't always show up in a balance sheet analysis is kind of what we call contingency or contingent assets. And again, the most common one you tend to see is somebody has a life insurance policy, which again is only going to pay out a death benefit, if that's the option. But then they may take a loan out on the cash value, and that's one way to get liquidity out of it for retirement purposes, and that necessarily wouldn't show up on this analysis unless that you explicitly have the loan going or are certain you're going to use so much money, such a size of loan, then you would probably put that in. But that may be available to us. It's just not being reflected here. So the other point here is the inflation risk factor, in that they look pretty set and they have modest, again, expenses right now, except for the lifestyle expense, and assuming they can get that down, we know that the guaranteed income has an inflation kicker. We don't know about the pension income, but inflation does become an issue. And one way people deal with that is if they've got, more financial assets, which tend to do, okay in an inflationary environment. So one of the things to consider, if it's possible, but they need to take care of the liquidity option or issue first and make sure they have enough cash reserves. But this thing called where they actually you start increasing your equity exposure. It's called an increasing equity glide path the later you get. And given that so much of their funding is already locked down nicely with the guaranteed income and pension income, there may be an opportunity, again, if they have enough liquidity, to take some of the current assets and refocus them more to straight equities. And there's a good article on this by Ron Sir, and that's there. And then what got that whole idea going is a more detailed article we'll go over later. And I guess the main point of looking at this whole thing is with this type of analysis, you really have to do it from, I hope I learned something looking back how I got here, but what you really need to focus on is where you go from here. It really doesn't matter how you got here, as long as you don't make the same mistake if you ended up here by, based on problem. But you need to be very forward-looking and just, drop what's in the past. This is what I have now, and this is what I need to do to make it right. Okay, let's bring it on home. So if you want more details, here you can click on the blue shoe, and that will get you over to this article on the right, which is the more detailed reducing retirement risk. And this was by Wade Fowle and Michael Kitces. It's pretty dense, but it's good reading if that interests you. So that's it. You can click on the movie reel icon to view this video and download it, straight from this PDF. Anyways, thank you for viewing. Please provide feedback in the blog, and always welcome any and all thoughts and recommendations. Thanks again.